To order. This is the August 18th, 2020 Town of Wolfeboro Planning Board meeting. My name is Kathy Barnard and the chairman of the Planning Board. And I'm now going to read the required script. Due to the COVID-19 crisis and in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. However, the Planning Board has jointly decided to proceed with a hybrid meeting format, allowing for members of the public and board to attend and participate in the meeting in person or virtually. In accordance with RSA 91-A:2-3, the board has one member joining the meeting remotely, which a public body has the authorization to allow. At this time, I'm going to wait to take the roll call. Votes taken during this meeting will be via roll call vote for all members. In accordance with Emergency Order 12 for members of the public, this is to confirm that we are, number one, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means through GoToMeeting. All members of the public and board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the GoToMeeting platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number: 1-646-749-3122. followed by the audio access code 918-242-429, or by video following the directions on the Town of Wolfeboro website posted on the homepage under the virtual town meeting login information page. 2, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of how to access the meeting in person or using GoToMeeting, and instructions are provided on the Town of Wolfeboro website at wolfeboronh.us on the virtual town meeting login information page. 3, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting. If there are problems with access, if anybody has a problem accessing the meeting via phone or computer, please immediately call 603-391-8489 or email planningdirector@wolfeboronh.us. In the event that the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. I'm now going to introduce the planning board members by doing a roll call vote. And if you're not in the Great Hall, if you'd indicate if you're by yourself in a room and the reason that you're not attending the meeting. So first, Peter Goodwin.
Here, and there's no one else in the room.
Okay, thank you. John Thurston.
Aye.
Mike Hodder.
Present.
Brad Harriman.
Here.
Susan Ripplier.
Here.
Julie Jacobs.
Here.
Okay, and Matt Sullivan is here, and also Mary Jane Shelton, who is taking the minutes this evening. Okay, Von Dugan is not going to be joining us tonight. The first item, we have no public hearing, so the first item is an action item. It's a voluntary lot merger, lots 143-019 and 143-016, declaration of trust, Paul A. O'Brien and Paul A. O'Brien, trustee. Matt, did you just want to say a couple words about this merger?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Kathy. The applicant is requesting the merger of two lots on Christopher Court / Jason's Way. As you can see from the tax map image that was included in the deeds indicated, lot 14316 is approximately 1.01 acres, and lot 14319 is approximately 1.09 acres, both being conforming from an area perspective with the underlying zoning of the residential district. Obviously, lot 14316 is occupied by a primary detached dwelling unit, which does appear to be non-conforming due to its encroachment into the rear and side setbacks, while lot 19 is currently vacant with its frontage on Jason's Way. Both lots are in conformity when it comes to a frontage perspective, but certainly the merger of these two lots does not exacerbate any existing nonconformity, and it does actually resolve the nonconformity of the primary structure and its side setback encroachment. As a result, I would recommend that this lot merger be approved by the planning board.
And it's still within the rear setback.
That's correct.
But there's no change.
No change.
To that. Okay. Okay, any questions?
I had two questions, Matt.
Hang on just a second, Mike. I'm sorry, but Julie, would you be willing to sit in Vaughn's
Yes, I
place
will.
tonight? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Sorry,
Mike.
two questions for the planner. Both lots are encumbered by easements.
Correct.
After the merger, do the easements survive?
They do survive, yes.
Okay, and the second question is, if you compare the photograph, which I guess is taken from the town map, tax maps, on the first page in our packet on this application, with the plan presented as part of the application, book 100, page 64, I'm just wondering, on the photograph, it appears that the entire circle of that turnaround is within the property line, and on the plan it is not. Is that just an artifact?
So Mike, when you say you're saying the entire internal of the bulb, the grass area, is that what you're referring to?
No, the turnaround itself, is that a...
Peter, could you mute, please? We're getting a tremendous amount of feedback from you for some reason. There's only three people. There's only 3 people on, and one of them is my office computer. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Mike, I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question?
On the photograph, and this is just it may just simply be an artifact, but I found it curious, and I'd just like to get an explanation if I may. On the photograph taken from the town tax maps, the turnaround, where the word Jason's is in the center, is completely within the property line?
It is not.
Well, it's not on the plan.
It's not on the aerial image either.
It's not what? I'm sorry, I could not.
On the aerial image, the turnaround goes through and into the property.
Yes, but the top of the turnaround is inside the property line. That's how it appears on that picture.
Oh, understood. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
If you turn to the plan, the top of that turnaround is beyond the property line.
Yeah, so I think that the short answer is that the turnaround was not constructed in conformance with the plan.
Okay, that's good.
Well, yeah, and I would offer more, but I probably shouldn't. But I don't think there's an issue created by that because of the age of the turnaround. But
I was just curious.
It was not constructed in conformance with that. Obviously, one of the interesting notes as well is that when you look at the approved subdivision plan,
on this plan it says 25-foot easement onto that property.
that's correct for the slope and drainage easement, but Mike is saying that it goes, the turnaround was shown to go over the property line at the back here. And if you look at the aerial image, John, this whole turnaround thing is actually pushed down on the aerial image. I think that was Mike's,
Yeah.
because I was looking at the same thing that you are right now.
This looks pretty similar to me than this picture.
Yeah, the only difference is that it's just pushed south.
But it says 25-foot easement on this.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's,
Even though it may be pushed down, there's still a 25-foot easement on that side.
it's absolutely fine. And the interesting note I was just going to point out is that you'll see that if you're looking at that turnaround on the subdivision plan, you'll see that the turnaround easement was to be abandoned when Jason's Way became a through road, contemplating future development to the north of this area. Obviously, that development has not happened, therefore the turnaround easement is still in effect in full because that road has not been built out as a through road. So oddly enough, the development didn't happen, but certainly it doesn't have any impact on the merger before you this evening.
It's really hard to say because no inspection's gone out there to say how wide the road is, because that's really what you have to determine here.
Yeah, and the way that the turnaround was actually proposed on the plan was a solid paved or gravel turnaround, not with a vegetated circle in the middle as it is today. It was proposed to be a solid surface and then with a slope and drainage easement on the sides.
Yeah.
So it was built differently, potentially less impervious surface, but certainly it does not match what was on the original approved plan.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, other questions, comments? Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the voluntary lot merger of lots 143-019 and 143-016.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion has been made. Somebody want to second the motion?
I'd second that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, motions have been made and seconded. I'll do a roll call vote. Peter Goodwin?
Yes.
Thank you. John Thurston?
Yes.
Mike Cotter?
Yes.
Brad Harriman?
Yes.
Susan Replier?
Yes.
And Julie Jacobs?
Yes.
And Kathy Barnard, I vote yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Moving on to public comment section. And I don't see anyone, well, I don't see anyone at all now right on the screen, but that's right. But if there's any member of the public listening in and wants to comment, now would be the time to do that. And I don't believe there is. So we'll go on to the next item. Oh.
We'll get Peter back.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, so we're on to other business now. And the first item is drive-through restaurants. We really need to decide how we want to proceed with this. Mr. Zimmerman came and talked with us, made another plea for us to consider adding drive-through restaurants. So we need to say, yes, we will do this, or no, we will not, and come up with some compelling reasons. Thought that I had that we might want to talk about is allowing drive-through restaurants only in the central business district on lots of 1 acre or more, as Mr. Zimmerman had proposed, with a special exception, not a permitted use. So I don't know how anyone would react to that.
Would they still be allowed with a special exception?
Which way?
Are they still allowed with a special exception right now?
No,
No,
they are not
no.
currently allowed by a special exception.
Right.
They are a prohibited use as of right now.
So that would at least be a step up at this point.
I have to refer to the town vote on this issue, which came up twice,
Right.
and it was 2-1 in both cases in 2017 and 2020. And that indicates to me that there's strong disagreement in the town about whether or not the citizens want to have a drive-through restaurant. I think that if we propose to allow them by special exception now, we're kind of circumventing the will of the town.
Okay.
I think it would be important. I think it's important that we recognize Mr. Zimmerman's concern. I think it's important also that we recognize that a significant percentage of the townspeople voted in favor of having a drive-through restaurant. We can't just disenfranchise them. I think what we should do is to organize a study of drive-through restaurants and definitely get public input, have a hearing, informational session, however you want to do it, have people come in and state their cases for or against, and then based upon what we hear, either kill it because clearly the public doesn't want it, and I'm not sure that we should go against the public will when there's no pressing need, or start a study seriously, leading perhaps to a special exception use. That's my suggestion.
Okay. Go ahead, Julie.
Did we vote it down in in 2018 and 2019 consecutive years?
17 and 20.
17 and 20.
17 and 20. So it's been, you know, we've
We
within
still
3
feel
years.
the same way.
Yeah, basically the same way, two to
Right.
1 against, within a space of 3 years. Now, as Mr. Zimmerman said, the warrant article was, 1, petitioned, so it's kind of tough, and 2, was not recommended by the planning board, which makes it even tougher. So, you know, he had a couple of strikes against that article to begin with, so you have to give that to the side that wants to have a drive-through restaurant here. But on the other hand, we had a significant number of people who did not seem to want one. And we have to respect the wishes of the majority. We can't just willy-nilly go ahead and make one allowable by special exception by the will of the planning board, because
Well, we can't do that without going through.
we'll have a public hearing, yeah, but
And
you get my
ordinance.
point.
Yeah.
We're elected by the people. We have a responsibility to listen to what they have to say.
Okay.
So I have a new take, especially because of the way the spring is lined up. If I go to Nolan's and I have to get out of my vehicle, I was just getting drive-up takeout at Nolan's. When I went down to Louis Pizza, I actually had to get out of my vehicle and I went to the window and I got takeout. I drove up almost right up next to the window, but I had to walk 5 feet. I think that's what we're parsing the words here, of a drive up and hand it to me if I'm in my vehicle, or drive up and I walk 5 feet out of my vehicle and I get it. Because that seems to be what's going on with most of the restaurants at this present time.
Right, John, but when
I'm
those
just
two
stating the
things are-
facts.
I know, right now. But drive-through to me means like you're getting in the line at McDonald's and you wrapped around the building.
Well, that's
That's what it
okay.
means to me.
That's everybody's got a right to their thought and their opinion, but I don't know as if we want to put out a predisposition of somebody doing something that's already bad. I think we ought to give somebody the fair opportunity, like we give Nolan's, we give Louis Pizza, we give Huck's Hoagies, we give all these other places. If you could get close to Huck's Hoagies, I'm sure they would have a drive-up window. It's only like 5 feet away. I asked if there would be a complaint, if it was competition. He gave a pretty fair explanation. I was not discontent with hearing that. You know, it's a free market out there. I don't think that we have things in place that allow bad construction. We've got the design guidelines. We're looking out for the interests of the other people, how it looks.
Well, I think another thing we have to remember is that your standard drive-through restaurant comes with branding, double arches or some guy in a hat with a fish in his hand or whatever they are. I don't go to them, I don't know. But there's branding, so we're going to have an architectural issue to deal with too. We're going to have a traffic flow issue. We're going to have parking issue, deliveries issue. And, we need to study these before we do anything, and we also need to listen to what the people have to say.
On certain days, I would go to Meredith Village, and there would be people coming out that, and more so this weekend on Dunkin' Donuts. On the last 4 weekends, actually, there's been stacking and coming right out into the road. So I don't think that saying because somebody else is going to come in, they're creating the problem. I know that there already is a problem, so we should look at that and solve that problem and incorporate something else coming forward so that it can all work together.
Well, there's a McDonald's in Freeport, Maine, in a building that looks colonial, with a set of golden arches, which is around maybe 1.5 feet high. You've probably all seen it. It fits in perfectly with the town, the architecture of the town. So I'm not saying that a drive-through restaurant, generic, could not come into Wolfeboro and fit just fine. But I'm saying that a large number of the people in the town don't seem to want one, and we have to respect that. We serve at their pleasure. And if we are going to think about allowing a drive-through restaurant, like we did when Donkeys came in, we had to think about traffic flow, parking, deliveries, trash removal, etc., before it went through. And we can't do that without planning. So part of that planning would be public information hearings. What do you want? How do you feel about it? Why don't you like it? Put it all into the mix and then make a decision. I'm not saying yes or no, because that's not my job.
Go ahead, Susan.
Sorry.
I remember Mr. Zimmerman was concerned that the public was influenced by the planning board's recommendation. So I just have a question. If we put it out for vote, could we have it no recommendation at all from the planning board, so that it would be a pure vote by the public with no knowledge of how the planning board feels? Can we do that?
Well, it says we're supposed to hold the public hearing, and then do we have to make a recommendation?
I would say that if you're going to vote on some, then you should vote on all. If you'd like to change the way you go about voting, then you certainly could vote on none of the recommended zoning changes, but I don't know that that's the right option either, which is tricky.
Well, couldn't we as a board take a vote whether or not we wanted to take a vote to support that article also?
You could, yeah. It's an interesting question. I think it's a really interesting question. I'd be worried that if you do it here, will you do it on others in the future? Maybe that's okay, but I'm always in favor of consistency. But ultimately, you can choose to do what you'd like. Absolutely.
Which would be what?
You could choose to not vote.
To take a vote as a board to decide whether or not we were going to take a vote on the position.
To not vote as a board, is that what you're saying, John?
To take a vote on the position. If we voted unanimously to say, no, we're not going to take a position on this vote, so we wouldn't vote and make a recommendation beforehand.
We're not obligated to make a recommendation. Like Matt said, it would be inconsistent if we didn't.
Yeah.
But if that was the way the board wanted to go, I would say just don't say anything.
Well, it would certainly give us a better answer to give to him. He would no longer be able to say the public is following your recommendation, when that would have nothing to do with it at that point in time.
Yeah, that would remove that cover, sure.
Oh, what do you folks think about having a public meeting to get input? And Jesse.
I would suggest that a public meeting would be a good way to go. And I would also suggest that if there was to be no prejudice one way or the other by the planning board, everybody could vote to abstain.
Well,
I think that's the only way.
Go ahead, Julie.
Help me remember, when we voted last March on this particular item, this was a petition article, wasn't it? This had nothing
Yes.
to do with the
Correct.
planning board. So why was Paul Zimmerman saying that the planning board influenced the vote?
The board,
If it was strictly a petition warrant article, which was at the end of the voting.
so the board weighs in on petition warrant articles for planning and zoning articles, making it a bit different than the Board of Selectmen in that way. So the planning board did indicate its preference on that particular article that was listed as number 9 or 10 on the ballot. So it's a little bit different than the Board of Selectmen in that sense. I don't remember what the board's vote was ultimately. It was against. I don't
It was
remember what.
unanimous against.
Yeah, it was no.
Okay,
I don't think, it
Yes,
was
right.
unanimous not to recommend.
okay.
But it was still a petition warrant article that
But it was
Paul
a-
could put in no matter what anybody said. It was his
It was
right to
a-
put it in.
It was a zoning article, and we have a responsibility to take a position on zoning articles to alert the public. And that was the reason
Right.
why we did that.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, we all stated our reasons, I think.
So if this happens again, aren't you still responsible for saying, as the board, yes, this is a good idea, or no, this is a bad idea? So can you really abstain?
Well, like Susan suggested, we would just simply not go there. Because we don't have to.
Right.
We just not go there and see what happens at that point. But I think, I think that we took a position last time because clearly the first vote in 2017 was 2-1 against, and we had clear public interest not to have a drive-through restaurant at that point.
We didn't really have any design guidelines in place either, so we didn't have anything to fall back on and think that the planning board had some criteria to follow to guide the applicant to something that everybody would appreciate in the town. And I think the design guidelines offer us a little bit more of a tool to work with the plan and craft that.
And that's different from when this was brought to the voters.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right, yeah,
Kathy?
yes,
I think I agree with Peter, and I think Mike alluded to it too, that I think we kind of owe it to, not just Mr. Zimmerman who made that presentation a few weeks ago, but also the third of the voters who voted in favor of the article before, to hold a discussion anyway, just to take a look at it. Not committing at all, obviously, right now, whether we would present it as a warrant article or not, but just have that discussion. And my thought too is, this year has been a completely different year for the restaurants and everybody around here. People's thoughts and, the appetites, not to make a pun there, but, might have changed for, how to proceed with this type of issue here. So I think it's worth having a discussion, maybe a public hearing, kind of get the public's view on this, kind of see how they're thinking about it right now, and then decide at that time whether to, bring it forward or not, or in what degree, what manner to bring it forward, whether by special exception or to allow it, or what, but that's how I'd think to proceed.
yeah, okay.
I think
Okay.
that I would feel uncomfortable if we scheduled a public hearing as of tonight with a date certain, because we're going to have a transition period coming up,
Right,
which is going to be a certain degree of chaos.
yes,
And we have a fairly heavy work schedule anywho.
right,
So I would suggest that this issue stays alive, and we think just to hold public information sessions like we do with the lodging forum, hold a restaurant forum or something like that, because we would need to get the restaurateurs in town involved too, because of the
Right.
competition with them.
yeah,
And schedule that or think about scheduling that, was it August, September, October? Say sometime October, November, once, we know what we're doing as far as the
Right.
planner is concerned,
right,
and how the work schedule is working out.
right,
So the last time we talked about this at the last meeting, I got home And when I went home, I went onto the town's website, and it says questions on the website, for the town's website. You post questions on the website, don't you? Facts and questions, and get feedback on the website, Town of Wolfeboro.
We can get website feedback. We've done limited surveying through the website. We're actually going to be doing more moving forward on the cable franchise agreement pretty soon here. We have the ability to post surveys.
I don't know why we don't try that approach there with the hands-off approach and try to at least put something out there electronically and give the public who wants to view the town website a chance to chime in.
Well, couldn't we do both?
We could do both.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
No doubt.
Yeah, I think that would
I think that's
be,
probably good. Okay.
how about that?
Sure, that sounds a good idea.
You folks? Okay, well, we're going to come to the work program, so, but I agree with Mike. I think we want to put some thought into,
I agree.
getting
Yeah,
the
I
word
do.
out to everybody.
Yes.
And so that we do get some real good input. Okay, all right, so are you
Wait,
all
I
on
have another
board then
question, I'm sorry.
with
Kathy,
moving ahead?
I have another question.
Oh, yeah.
So would that wouldn't constitute a vote, just getting feedback from the public?
Yes, and then after we get the feedback, then we can sort of look at all the issues people have brought up and see if we think that we should go ahead or not.
Kind of drive
So
the
it would
wheels
not
a
be a
little
vote.
bit and push it
So it would
along.
just sort of give us an indication of which way people are going.
Right, right. Because I agree with Mike, the vote was overwhelming both times. And so that has sort of made me think we really shouldn't do anything. But, well, let's try this approach, okay? And see what issues come up, and then we may have to study the issues. The traffic is always one, but on an acre parcel, you could have a pretty good stacking plan, so, okay.
Would it be a good idea, would it be diplomatic if either you as chairwoman or Matt wrote a letter to Mr. Zimmerman saying the issue is going to be coming up in the future and we're thinking about it, and we haven't simply blown you off because we don't care?
Yeah, it's okay if I write to him, Matt?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So, all right, very good. I think that's a good plan. Okay, the next one, Shorefront Residential District. I'm a member of the Wolfeboro Waters Committee, which was formed by the Board of Selectmen. And so we're dealing with basically water quality issues in all of our lakes. And the subcommittee I'm on is, we've met with Dave Ford and Matt and talked about several issues that relate to our various regulations, but the one that seemed to be the most important, and Peter is on the subcommittee and myself, so along with Rich Massey, Mike Turner, and who's the other person? Anyway, we have a really very active subcommittee. So we've looked at the Shorefront Residential District along with Matt and, Art Slocum, it was the other person, sorry, Art. And Art was actually on the committee back when the Shorefront Residential District, when this ordinance was rewritten back quite a few years ago.
I was on that also.
And John, you were on it, and so was Vaughn.
Yeah.
And so, and we spent, I think, a couple of years developing this ordinance, but one of the things we wanted to make sure was that people did something when they were developing in the shorefront to address water quality issues. And what Matt sees is a lot of redevelopment projects. And he was he felt, I think, that the regulations could be clearer for redevelopment projects. And so we've come up with some changes to this ordinance, and Matt, why don't you go ahead and explain?
Sure. Thank you, Kathy. And as just to affirm what Kathy has just noted, about 90% of the applications that we see for shorefront permitting here in Wolfeboro are considered redevelopment or very modest construction addition projects on existing parcels along the water. The development of a virgin parcel is actually quite rare when it comes to shorefront permitting, simply based on the lack of land availability along our water bodies. Certainly there are parcels that exist, but I don't think any of the changes recommended here within this document will have any negative impact on the development of those sites. Kathy and the committee had asked me to take a look at this, and obviously this is ultimately the planning board's purview, so we wanted to get these changes to you as quickly as possible, though I feel that this is a critical set of amendments that the planning board should pursue as part of the 2021 zoning season. Generally, the ordinance is in excellent shape. It's applied very, very easily and our consultants and the folks we work with on a regular basis have a good understanding of the rules within it. However, some of the more perhaps innovative pieces of this that deal with redevelopment are often sometimes vague, intentionally so, but it can make applying those sections of the ordinance a bit challenging at times. So I just want to walk you through a few recommended changes this evening, this being sort of the first review of some of these, and get your thoughts, get your feedback, and hopefully get an opportunity to go back to the subcommittee and certainly to the planning board at a later time to talk to you about some of these changes moving forward. To start, though, I'd like to go to page 3 and look at section 175-67, which is titled the Shorefront Lot Improvement Standards. And I want to focus on the impervious surface limitations section of this. If you aren't aware, within the shorefront residential district, there's a 30% cap on impervious surfaces. However, as the ordinance currently stands, if a parcel is above 20% or seeks to go above 20%, that property owner is required to prepare a stormwater management plan that's prepared by a professional engineer. One of the sort of administrative interpretations that I've used, and this is very, I want to put this in the public record because I think this is the way the ordinance is intended to be used, is that if an existing property is at 80% impervious coverage today, and they seek to reduce to 70% impervious, so they're improving the condition of the property, I have waived that professionally engineered stormwater management plan requirement because my understanding of those projects has been that they are bringing the lot closer into conformity with the ordinance, and therefore they aren't required to prepare that sort of plan. One of the dangerous things that I've started to see, though, is that we have many shorefront plans that are coming in where the property owner or the applicant claims a very de minimis reduction in impervious surface, say from 39.4% to 39.3%, although they're adding pervious pavers and they're adding a large structural area. And it leaves me worrying that we're actually not really increasing the conformity of a lot of these projects, but unfortunately, under the current policy, I waive that professionally engineered stormwater management plan requirement. That was one of the bases of the recommendation, and I'm going to focus instead on section C to start, and then go back to section B. But in section C, what I've proposed is that if a project is proposing a decrease in impervious coverage, which is obviously a benefit, it must be a proposal of at least 1% of overall lot coverage in order to take advantage of that exemption from the stormwater management plan requirement. Therefore, if you're proposing 0.1% or 0.2%, you aren't going to get the same leniency, and you would actually be required to prepare a stormwater management plan if you submit that kind of permit to the town. The 1% is an arbitrary number. It's really pulled out of a hat, but I would say that the majority of projects that take advantage of the exemption I'm talking about tend to be between 0.1% and 1% in modification of impervious surface. So I think this would get at the vast majority of the projects that we see if this change is made. One of the other things I've added here is that I think that we should require, as part of the shoreline permitting process and as part of the building permit process, that there's real documentation provided to the town that affirms that any kind of stormwater BMPs or best management practices that are being installed are actually being done in accordance with the plan. And one of the ways that we can do that without increasing resources is actually pushing the burden onto the applicant or the homeowner to provide documentation to the town as part of the process, so that we don't have to be on site to see certain things done, which may not be practical, but we still have documentation in place to ensure that what's being proposed by the plans is actually being done on site. So those are the two fundamental changes within Section C. And then there's also one clarification there, and that is that when it comes to what the contents of the professionally engineered stormwater management plan should be, it's not really clear what impervious surface or what condition of the lot that plan is intended to address. Is it all of the impervious surface? Is it only that above 20%? What exactly should that PE stamped plan actually look at? And what I've proposed here is that if you are required to do that plan, it has to deal with any of the impervious coverage exceeding 20%. It has to be handled by on-site stormwater BMPs or stormwater management. That's another clarification there that I think is critical, because many times I'm asked by consultants, well, what am I really supposed to do for a stormwater plan? And I generally suggest that they have to do a first flush event, that sort of thing, as sort of the baseline calculation for runoff curve of what they're doing on the property. But I don't have a hard back to stand on when people argue with me, and they have often argued that they can simply stamp the plan and they're done. So I think that clarification is really critical. Within Section B, we've added a very, very new feature to the ordinance, and one that's more restrictive, I think, when it comes to impervious coverage, and that is that we've suggested sort of a middle ground here, that if you're going to exceed 15% rather than the 20%, you must implement one stormwater management system on the property as part of the redevelopment plan or the new development plan. That is not currently within our zoning ordinance, but I believe that we need to be a bit more stringent with our impervious coverage limitations and what we require when you're going above a certain amount. So you'd be required to install one stormwater system. You would still have to meet that condition that it's certified by photographic documentation or some sort of inspection by the town, but that would be required at that 15% threshold rather than the 20% that we currently have in place. So certainly adding some additional restriction there. I know I've just said a lot, but I'm curious if you have any questions about these suggested modifications here.
Go ahead, Mike.
In Section B, project that will exceed 15%, it's clear if you refer to Section C that it must be 15 to 20%, or 15 to 19.9%.
I'm sorry, Mike.
There's a range implied in paragraph B, correct?
Yes, yes, there is. That could be clarified.
Would it be helpful to the contractor to have that range specified?
Yes,
15
I think
or
it would.
less than 20, or something, however you want to word that.
Yes, I think that would be helpful.
In the second line, last word "are" should be "is," since the subject is singular. Stormwater management system.
Yep.
And then in paragraph C, I would suggest that the first complete red sentence, any project proposing, should be broken out as a separate paragraph, perhaps D, and then all proposed stormwater management systems will run on to the end of the black text to make it consistent with the way paragraph B is constructed.
Okay.
Do you follow that?
I do follow that. I think that makes sense.
Because right now, any project proposing a decrease, that's a separate subject. You've been talking, paragraph B is increasing, paragraph C is increasing, and then all of a sudden you have a decrease, and then you go back to what an increase above 20% is required to show. So break out that sentence, any project proposing, make it a separate paragraph, because it really does stand by itself.
And it really should apply to both the 20% situation and the 15% situation. So I think
Correct.
breaking
Well,
it out is wise.
You've got it in the 15% already, so you just need to put it into the 20.
Yep.
And then the last question I had was, do you really want to require proof for you don't have to require proof for a decrease. That's fine, you don't have to require proof.
Right, correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, other questions?
Yep.
Go ahead, John.
All right, Matt, let's put a face on this.
Okay.
In the big picture, somebody comes to you and you're enacting this policy
Yep.
because they came to you to do what?
So a practical example of this would be we have a property that's at 30% impervious coverage. And they want to take an existing driveway that is a paved driveway currently. They want to convert that to a fully pervious driveway with a full gravel base and, you know, the full design, and add a massive structural expansion. So what they're doing is
Add a what expansion?
a massive structural,
Okay.
a big structural expansion. So what they're effectively doing is trading a paved driveway for a pervious driveway, which is
Surface for surface.
that's right. Which well, impervious for pervious though, which is good. But at the same time, they're doing a massive structural expansion that would not otherwise be allowed unless they do some pervious surface conversion.
But they have two solid surfaces. They have a driveway, which is an impervious, and they have a roof to be that's impervious.
The driveway, provided that it's a full gravel-based driveway, is pervious within the context of the regs. As long as they, and this gets back to that photographic documentation piece, as long as they have a spec in their shoreline plan that says we're going to do the full thing, and it's not just a paver on grade, we treat that as a pervious surface. So they can exchange that for additional impervious area or the roof that you mentioned.
Okay.
The problem is that what we're seeing is that they're playing with the percentages, and they're smart about it. I mean, it's not done maliciously, but they're playing with that, so they have a reduction of 0.1%, and therefore they're not required to do any formal stormwater management plan that's really prepared by somebody who knows what they're doing. Fortunately, through the negotiation process, we tend to say, you know, we'd really like some BMPs installed on the property, and generally we get good results with that, but I don't believe that we have the mandate to do that currently if they are reducing the impervious surface on the lot.
Okay, so now somebody's done their project. Are we talking about water that would escape their property and go onto another neighbor's property?
It could very well be. It could very well be. You know, if the structure that they are going to build could run off onto an adjacent property.
Could it run into the lake?
I think it's possible.
Right.
Okay, so we got a couple areas we want to identify there. Okay, so
Yep.
when we talk about this aspect, you talked about baseline calculations.
Yes.
Feed it to me a little bit more on what you're talking
So,
about here.
yeah, it's what's not clear when we say, so the current language basically says a stormwater management plan prepared by a PE must be implemented to infiltrate increased stormwater from development. That's all well and good, but when we're asking for a PE prepared plan, they want to know, are we required to deal with a 1-year storm? Are we required to deal with a 24-hour event? Are we required to deal with only the effective impervious area that's being added? Are we required to deal with, I have none of that detail here. So I've had a lot of arguments with folks about what does this mean?
So you want the storm year, you want the 25-year or the 50 years, what you're looking for?
I'm actually not even looking for that. What I'd like to start with is just by saying, you've got to basically handle all of the square footage above 20% with whatever stormwater you're putting on stormwater system you're putting on site. So if you're going from 19% to 25%, that 5% above 20, whatever, if that's 2,000 square feet, you need to prove to me with a drainage calculation that you're going into an infiltration trench or a pervious or a rain garden or something like that. And if they can clear that hurdle, then that's great. But right now, there's nothing that really prescribes exactly how they're supposed to do that. So,
okay, so
Yep.
so this is purely redevelopment with structure. This really doesn't involve the landscaper that's gone out there to somebody's house and said, I want a walkway and I want some stuff over here, take up my concrete of this old thing and put that in.
that's really not, this is aimed at larger redevelopment projects.
Okay.
But you know, we see a lot of these where somebody is taking away a 10 by 4, you know, space on their house, and they want to add a 10 by 11, and they're over 20%. Well, do I have to do a PE stamped plan? Yes, you do, but this is what you're required to address. Or we can use that to say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to do a PE stamped plan, but if you reduce the size of your addition, you actually are exempted from that requirement, which I think is an incentive as part of the process to actually decrease the size of structures.
So what I was trying to make sure you were away from was when we crafted this ordinance, Mr. Montrone gave some allowances so you would have a 6-foot wide path to the lake and to the beach. And in those calculations, I don't know if we should exclude those calculations out of the mix because we are granted those.
Yeah, so I think I know what you're getting at, John, and those...
But that would be more the landscaper situation anyway.
It depends what it is, because one of the things that we're seeing a lot more of is pervious walkways to beaches and things like that. And again, if those are fully designed and engineered, or, you know, I say engineered loosely with those, but they have a full base to them, they're well done, that's a pervious surface in my opinion. If you want to pave a path down to the lake, it's an impervious surface and it counts against you. But
well, they do make items that make those surfaces impervious. You could buy the pavers that have a space between them that allow for the calculations to be an impervious area, and you can use certain types of topping mixes between the stones that are more modern that allow water infiltration also. So I wouldn't want to discard those, but it comes to mind that, you know, that's a complex area also.
Yeah, and those you definitely don't want to discard those, because those are the small things that property owners are more likely to do that can keep them, honestly, out of permitting completely. So I often will say to somebody, look, if you can use hand tools and you can do something pervious, you don't have to come talk to me at all.
That's right.
So we want people to do just that, because then they're doing something good for water quality, they're doing something good for their property, and they don't have to pay a lot of money to file a permit with the state of New Hampshire or have me waste their time.
So the two things there, neighbors affliction or water quality.
And hopefully this deals with both. I think it does. But I did say to Kathy's group that this is really a start, and I'm not sure if this is perfect, particularly this 1% number that I've included in here, but I think that we need to get at this issue, because I think that these issues within this particular section are being used to take advantage of the ordinance in a way that wasn't necessarily contemplated when it was drafted. And the consultants are getting more and more clever, and I think to be responsive to them, this is a change that I would really strongly support that the planning board move forward with this coming year.
Even with the 1%?
I think we should vet that a little more. I know, Kathy, when we had talked, I'd like to meet with your team again and then bring this back to the board with maybe a bit more data to support that. I think 5% is too high of a burden. You know, I think that really kills kind of the small redevelopment project, and I don't want to do that. But I think if it can be a demonstrable decrease, it will force applicants to do some substantial removal of impervious surface as part of their permitting process.
Isn't that such a fine line, though? Somebody could manipulate 1%. I mean...
So the answer is yes, but the reality is that right now they're manipulating 0.1%, and even hundredths of a percent. And to me, that makes me not feel good. So if we can get marginal gains towards making it a little harder for them to do that, John, I think that would be a win. But you're right. I mean, depending on the size of the lot, 1% ain't much. Whereas, you know, if you're out on Tips Cove Road, 1%'s a lot, obviously. But anyway, I think your point's well taken.
Okay, you want to add?
Yeah, and I promise I'll be quicker with the rest of this. I know that took a little while. And shoreline permitting is a bit of a black hole too. So on page, I guess it's page 5. I apologize for not having page numbers here. Just clarifying one item within the primary structure setback. We enforce the fact that no structures are allowed within 50 feet, so we do need to clarify that language, because right now it says primary structures, but it should say all structures. There's administrative history to support that, but the ordinance says this instead, so I do think we need to clarify that. And clearly, if you go back within the development standards, that structures are subject to a 50-foot setback, so it's really just clarifying a discrepancy that exists. On lot redevelopment, this is really the issue that I had called to the attention of Kathy's committee, but in the end, I think the flexibility of lot redevelopment really is a benefit to the staff that are reviewing the permits. And this really gets at, if you are reducing impervious surface in the lot and you're installing stormwater management, to me, that's something that's clearly more nearly conforming. And you may therefore you may not have to establish all of the the unaltered area that's required on site. Every time it's a balancing act, but this really gets at, when we have redevelopment projects, is it realistic to require people to come fully into conformance with what the development standards are, recognizing that in many cases that's just not practical. And one of the more common ones that I've seen is you've got a lot that's 70% impervious. It clearly does not meet the unaltered area requirements. However, they are going to take away 10% impervious, do some planting. I think that should be allowed, where you could read certain portions of the ordinance to not permit that kind of activity. So I think this flexibility is critical. We did suggest a few modifications here based on our discussions at the committee level that.
So hold on. So when they decide to do that redevelopment, I mean, can they take advantage of the structure and the size? You see what I'm saying? It's like they've got you over the barrel almost, and you're trying to make sure that they do stormwater management, but if they build this monstrosity and they just do a little tiny rain garden off to the side that just cuddles a puddle of water, and it's not really the real deal.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I wish I could give you examples for all these things I'm talking about.
The example is a real rain garden, or a garden that's just 50% loam and 20% sand, compared to a rain garden that's got 1.5 feet of crushed stone underneath of it and drains off.
Right, and to that point, things have to be done correctly, but a more practical example of this is when we've got a structure that's, and I'm thinking of one in mind, but it won't help at all, but you've got a structure that's almost nearly all of it is forward of the 50-foot line. It's all up right along the water. They want to pull that back by 40 feet, revegetate, and do some things in there, but they still aren't able to meet the unaltered area requirements, nor the impervious surface requirements. I think staff should have the latitude to approve projects like that. It is a judgment call, but in many cases, if the plans are done properly, it's pretty clear.
So when you do a plan like that, though, is there redevelopment after that plan?
So that's a really good question. So I don't know if you know what you're asking, only because there's
I'm trying to stop the ball from rolling.
Yeah.
You give them an inch, and then they take a mile, and then they take another mile after that.
So one of the things that we are not good at, that gets to what you're saying, John, is that we are not good. If I can take any credit, it's that we have been better in the last couple of years, but we don't often document what the more nearly conforming piece is that's being done. And what happens then is that somebody comes in down the road and they aren't aware of the history and the benefits that a certain property or application was given. One of the things I've changed here is that they need to issue a narrative letter that clearly explains why they think their project is more nearly conforming. And then what would happen is staff would directly respond to that and say yes or no, so that any future redevelopment would be held to the standard that they presented as part of this application. Right now I do that because, quite frankly, it's kind of a sort of a cover your butt kind of activity. I write a detailed memo as part of my shoreline permits at the end about if it takes advantage of this piece. But I think that we've got to be really clear moving forward that if somebody is taking advantage of this incentive, they can't be allowed to take advantage of it again in the future. And it needs to be documented what exactly they did, and it's not necessarily being done completely clearly right now, and I think that's one improvement that could be made.
Okay, anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay, other questions or comments? Okay, so what, did you have something, Mike?
Just one question on
Okay.
on paragraph D.
Yes.
Would it be fair to call this redevelopment of non-conforming lots or not? Right, the title is lot redevelopment, but would it be right to also call it redevelopment of non-conforming lots, or are we just talking about non-conforming structures?
No, it wouldn't be appropriate to go in either direction because the nonconformity may be the unaltered area, it may be the lot coverage, it may be the structures themselves. It would not be the lot. I don't consider that a nonconformity that gets you any advantage under this provision.
Okay.
It has to be some characteristic of the site.
Okay.
So I prefer to keep it broad, Mike, if possible. But
And-
we did try to detail that to some extent in item 2 there and talk about what
Yeah.
potential areas are that you can use to sort of massage this if you want to as an applicant. And we removed some things that were really, I think, pretty, well-intended, but I don't know how, if somebody improves traffic management, that should get them the ability to do more along the shoreline. That doesn't
Right.
really make sense, and the committee kind of agreed with that. Similarly, if they're putting in a septic system, they're typically being required to do that, so why should we then give them a break when it comes to what they're doing in the shorefront? So that's one thing that we also removed. Fortunately, no one's tried to take advantage of it, but I think it requires clarification.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, and paragraph D on 1D, second line, with reference to the information provided pursuant to,
Yes.
why don't you just rewrite that to say information required by?
Okay.
Take out the legalese.
Okay, so, is it okay with everyone if I take this back to our subcommittee? Make sure they're comfortable, and John, if you would give it some more thought, especially about the 1%, because you were involved in all the previous discussions, so, but
Do you want to vote? You don't need to vote tonight.
no, this is more of a progress report.
Good.
Okay, the other thing that the subcommittee is working on are the stormwater management regulations, and actually Matt and Rich Massey and I had a meeting this morning, and so we're trying to clarify those regulations. This project is going to take a while, and we're not going to be seeing this in the final product until 2021, but we wanted to get started while Matt was here because he's been working with it for the last 4 years,
And the meeting we had today was literally just to grab some red flags of things that may need to be reviewed. So we're not proposing any changes as of right now. This is literally just, hey, what are problem areas? What improvements might be made? There were questions that were asked of me that I didn't even know the answer to, quite honestly, that I think require some clarification. The next steps that we had talked about that I'd like to run by you all is I would like to engage both an environmental firm and an engineer to take a look at these regulations and potentially make some recommendations for some changes based on the concerns that we've identified. As many of you know, the current regulations that we have are in a semi-draft form, although they were adopted by the board in full, that's clear, but it would be good to just formalize them, get them clearly into the regulations, because right now they don't really stand that way, although they are technically a legal requirement. So what we talked about today is engaging an engineer to do sort of a third-party review, make some recommendations back to you all for consideration, and because it's a set of regulations, you have the ability to amend them at any time subject to a public hearing. So it doesn't have to meet the zoning schedule for March of this year. So you have a little more flexibility to make some amendments.
So is it okay if we go ahead and, okay, because I think the meeting today was really good.
So what are you going ahead with? What's the formality here? Are we appointing some committee here, or are we just taking suggestions randomly from everybody?
What I think will that's kind of a good question, because one of the things that Kathy and I talked about a little bit is this Waters Committee has momentum as a Board of Selectmen committee, but clearly this is a planning board document that they're ultimately looking at. So I think all that they're doing, John, is looking at and flagging some things. Ultimately, the engineer review is going to be something that I'd like you all to sort of agree to do, because I think it will be, first of all, I think it should be paid from the planning board's budget. And number two, I think that these are ultimately your regs, so if there are going to be changes made, you should approve of the process that we're using to make them. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the next step that I'd like to see.
Now, are we talking about stuff that has already come up in front of us, or are we just talking about cold stuff that's just being thrown towards us and said, we want you to be aware of this?
I think it's a mix, bad answer, but I think it's a mix of things that maybe weren't clear when the regulations were first adopted. They're kind of well-intended things that aren't really clear to at least to me now. But then there are other things. I'll give one specific example. The operations and maintenance plans, the administrative requirements for those do not make sense from a resource perspective. And I'd like to recommend some changes to that process. We don't have an issue that we're reacting to, but when we've gone through the process recently, both on Huggins Hospital, on Goodhue Hawkins a bit as well, I'm not comfortable with where we're at the end of that and how the town plays a role in ensuring that those stormwater systems are actually maintained moving forward. I think we need to clean that up, because right now there's a lot of burden on the town and perhaps not as much on the property owner, and I think that should be changed.
So is there any room in this process here for another set of eyes? And
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. This meeting was only rushed actually because I obviously won't be here for an extended period of time, but this is, I think I said today, 6 months away from any kind of, this is like
Right. But
initial stages.
But we want the consultant to look at this and make sure that it's, number one, doable, understandable, clear, because those are some of the concerns that you brought to our little group's attention.
That would be the stormwater management that we have, correct?
One of the more practical...
We're just taking the existing regs and reviewing.
Okay.
And one of the other examples was some of the numbers that we were asking for until very recently, you couldn't even model for if you're doing a drainage analysis. So the question was, well, if they can't even be modeled, how can we possibly require them as part of the standard? So is there a practical requirement that we can put in place that still gets the same data, but can actually be produced so that the board is not sometimes approving things that may not meet the exact letter of the law?
So we've been asking stuff from our applicants to give us, and
so I'll be specific because I don't want to make it seem like it's a huge issue, but so some of the total suspended solid requirements particularly are very challenging to model, and they're theoretical, the numbers that you get. So there's some language in the regulations that implies that you have to prove some of those things, and at the development phase, it's impossible to really do that. So some of those changes I think need to be contemplated, because we need to make sure that we're not, to what you're saying, asking for things that people aren't able to provide. It needs to be changed because I think it puts everybody in an uncomfortable situation when we're looking at projects that meet 99% of the regs, but one of the items is theoretical and we can't really prove that it's going to happen. I'd be honest, publicly, that's what we're doing right now. I think we need to address that.
So is it it's a common situation?
The regulations have only been used on about 5 or 6 projects since I've been here because of the threshold for disturbance. So Goodhue, Huggins, Pine Hill Road Storage, those facilities over there, Brewster Academy, there may be 1 or 2 others kicking around, but we haven't had a lot of huge projects that have kicked into that category.
So are we satisfied or not satisfied? I mean, you named a couple things there. I know that the Pine Hill storage over the No, Zimmerman's storage, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Nope, the one over off of Pine Hill on the left-hand
Pine
side
Hill,
there.
okay.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think, I want to be really careful that I'm not saying the wrong message. We're not dissatisfied with the results on those properties I just named. What I'm dissatisfied with is that the regulations are not clear for the people who are applying.
Okay.
So Harriman Hill, and I forgot that one, they had a ton of questions about the regulations that I frankly could not answer because they
So
weren't.
we're nurturing the process a little bit.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
because we want people to use
Yes, no
them.
doubt.
Yeah. And if I'm getting, it's a little scary when I'm getting a question from a PE about what some runoff curve means or something like that. And it's not something I should be answering. So I think if we can resolve some of those issues to be more common language, or at least clearer to the engineers, I think it would result in better products in the form of the drainage analyses and the plans that you actually get to review, hopefully.
Which is mostly technical data.
Yeah. It really is. It's not the big substantive. You know, it's technical info that I think we're not clear on in some cases.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on to the next one, the habitable space definition.
Yes. And I did ask Kathy that we skip the mean natural grade until the next meeting, because that's one I want to talk to Vaughn about. She had reached out to me.
And so we'll hold on the.
Yep. So one of the other trends that we've seen recently is the connection of two habitable areas via hallways, and as you see written here, breezeways. They have to be clear, in order to be used this way, they have to be a fully closed and conditioned and heated breezeway, or tunnels, or we're getting more questions about tunnels. What this effectively does is give property owners the ability to create what would normally be known as a guest house that is in fact not a guest house because it is attached by a habitable space. I've learned that over the years this connection issue has morphed. Initially, the town permitted connections to be made with a simple concrete foundation that wasn't even necessarily built on area. And then subsequently, it went to that you could connect two structures with a breezeway, and it could be an open breezeway or a covered roof, and that would allow two structures to be considered attached. And then recently, our requirement has been that in order to be considered attached, two habitable spaces have to be connected by a fully habitable breezeway, hallway, or the like. I am beginning to grow uncomfortable with that interpretation, and as a result, I've brought forward this proposal to amend the habitable space definition yet again, though we did amend it last year, to read that hallways, breezeways, both open and enclosed, tunnels, and the like shall not be considered habitable for the purposes of connecting habitable space areas. I'm happy to show you examples of this if you'd like, but functionally what it is creating or allowing is, without this change, what we're allowing is attached guest houses, whether through a longer hallway or a shorter hallway, and I believe that circumvents the 2 primary structures per lot requirement that we currently have in place. So in an effort to clean that up, I would like to strongly recommend this amendment as well as part of 2021 zoning. A lot of folks that I work with know that this is coming because they know that my comfort level has been waning over the past months. And they are also aware that they've been getting away with this perfectly legally, but getting away with this over time. So I'd like to recommend this amendment moving forward to you.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Questions? In the original text, in your proposed language section, in the black type, the phrase "or utility spaces in similar areas." Now, were those supposed to be on the first floor too, or are they on all floors?
Utility spaces and other similar areas on both floors.
On both floors.
On both floors, those would not be considered habitable areas.
So they're not restricted only to the first floor?
When you say they are not restricted, you're saying utility spaces.
Well, everything that you have right now is on the first floor only.
Right.
And then you go, or utility spaces in similar areas. Now, are you restricting those utility spaces in similar areas to the first floor only also? Or are they anywhere in the building?
So this is actually a call to our amendment last year, and I hope that this is not an error, because the change that we made last year was to add that on the first floor only to toilet rooms.
Well, all I would suggest, if you do intend to mean utility spaces in similar areas on the first floor, stick them in the list of first floor stuff. If you don't, then they stand the way they are.
So the way that this is supposed to read is that, and perhaps we need another grammatical change here. The way this is supposed to read is that closets on any floor, halls on any floor, storage on any floor, toilets on the first floor only, or utility spaces in similar areas. So it's not intended to include closets, halls, and storage as first floor only items.
And it does.
Yeah, it does. So couldn't we, as long as we're amending this, couldn't we change it?
We're simply going to have to
Yeah.
make it clear.
Right, to make
Okay.
it clear.
That's not an issue at all.
And then in the next sentence, in the red stuff, I'll wait until you're finished thinking.
You ever have a moment where you feel like you might be a crazy person? Because I just read that so differently, but I accept I'm wrong. Yeah, I know I'm wrong. I just, the way I read it is different. So yes, I will make that change.
That's how they're reading it.
No, I know, and that's good. That's helpful. I know that I'm wrong in this case, so it's just, yeah, okay. I will change that. Good catch.
And in the red type, halls, breezeways, blah, 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 shall not be considered habitable for the purposes of connecting habitable space areas. I know what you're saying. If you were to say something like this, blah, blah, tunnels and the like that connect habitable spaces shall not be considered habitable spaces. Would that be clearer? Or is it just a matter of Michael's way as opposed to Matt's way?
I'm just worried that if we say, well, no, I think it's equally.
Then
I think it's fine. I mean, I'm not particularly married to any language for this actually at all. I'm open to any suggestions.
it just seemed to me that the text as presented could be stated in a smoother fashion.
Mike, could you say that again, what you just read?
Tunnels and the like that connect habitable spaces shall not be considered habitable spaces.
What about if they're connecting ADU?
Different. That's okay.
Okay.
Well, no, it depends. It depends if it's a hallway or what exactly it is. It has to be a common wall. So
You're saying all, so.
I think you still need the word for purposes of connecting in there somehow. Because you're talking about how those hallways, breezeways and stuff are being used. Not just the fact that they're habitable or not, but they're being used to connect habitable spaces.
Well, I said, my suggestion was those tunnels and the like that connect habitable spaces. So these things connect to habitable spaces. They don't get considered to be habitable themselves.
Yeah, it's basically like a red line with an X drawn through it saying you can't consider that a living area over there because of this. Or
just to leave Matt's language. I mean, there's nothing special about mine.
let's just stick with it for now. But it's
Fine.
as long as I'm more concerned about the intent tonight and whether you're comfortable with that. I think Mike's language, my language doesn't really matter. Are you comfortable with what I'm suggesting generally here and the issue that I'm trying to get at?
Yes.
The one that we dealt with last year, not to pat you on the back, but that has been huge this year, the toilet room issue, in restricting living spaces in accessory structures. That, I think, has been very effective. And I think this would also be a very effective change for dealing with this issue as well.
Okay, so
Okay.
we'll probably see this one again.
Yes, you will.
Okay.
Good.
All right, great. Okay, the next one, the voluntary design guidelines. We've had discussions about this when we were doing the design guidelines that we put into the site plan regulations, that the next step would then be to remove from the zoning ordinance all references to the architectural design, the voluntary design guidelines. So that's what this is, and this is going to be coming ahead as an ordinance amendment.
Very simple, that's all it is. It's like a
Yeah. technical.
boilerplate, super easy, but you do have to adopt it, unfortunately, so,
Oh, okay,
yep,
all right,
great.
okay. Visual Protection District. We talked about that a couple meetings ago, and after that, I thought we had made some decisions on this, so I went back and went through my notes and things of that nature, and came up with this sort of chronology. Basically, we did have discussions about this from 2011 through till 13 and 14. And then in 13, somewhere between 2013 and 2014, we decided we didn't want to deal with this issue.
That was the meeting at the library that we had
Yeah.
a full discussion on it.
Right.
We kind of beat that thing around, and
Yes.
we actually, we had 4-3 at that point.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And so we actually voted to not deal with it, and we took it out of our work program. So now, in our new master plan, there is no reference to a visual resource protection, but instead, there's a recommendation to establish land use regulations that require new development be cited in ways that minimize the impact on public open space and public view sheds on town or state roads or public property. So the Visual Resources Protection Ordinance, I think we kind of disposed of, unless this group wants to bring it back again, and it never was talked about in the master plan. Instead, there was a new focus in the master plan. So that's what I found out in my little research project.
I think the previous iteration of the planning board was a very wise iteration of the planning board. I think this is speaking only personally, a real gnarly issue. And if we're going to tackle this, it's going to consume a lot of time and effort. And I would prefer to this board devote its time and effort to what's already on our work plan.
And at some point in time, probably we're going to have to deal with the issue that's in the 2019 master plan, but I don't believe that was considered a priority, from what I remember. So, how do the rest of you feel about this? Brad, you were probably around for that discussion.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's something we don't need to have on our plate right now. I'm personally not in favor of putting more restrictions on people's properties, on ridges and on mountainsides and stuff. If they own a large tract, want to build a house there, or whatever. You know, getting into subjective determination as to what's a good view to look at. Somebody might like to look up a nice hillside, meadow or something like that, as opposed to just a tree line and stuff. So, I don't know. You look back some of the old pictures around Wolfeboro back in the 1900s, early 1900s and stuff, when it was all farmland right down to the lake. You could see Winnipesaukee from anywhere on South Main Street, or even up on North Main Street. It was just all clear vision there and stuff with no woods. Some people like that kind of look of farmland and stone walls and stuff. So I think for that reason, I'd be be against bringing it back up and putting it on a work, on a, you know, the worksheet, work session here for us, so.
Okay.
The only thing that I would suggest is that we might want to consider making sure that the construction where you can see it, instead of having white or bright colors, has subdued wood tones. And, you know, many of the buildings which you would see along the ridge line just disappear if there are darker colors on their outsides.
Okay. Anyone else? So, have you any thoughts?
No, I think Brad and Peter make good points, both of them.
I think some of this has to do with lighting also. That seems to be an issue, you know, not so much, sometimes the buildings that you don't notice during the day, they look sort of okay, but then darkness comes and the next thing you know, it's lit up like an airport. So some of the issue may be there, not just the other, you know, that we're thinking about with the view shed.
Okay, so, go ahead, John.
I think we've seen some examples of possible view shed problems. You had the people at Brewster Academy, where the Brewster Academy built a place on Clark Road, and the gentleman across the street was going to lose his view. It was a particular unique view pertaining to that individual property. The next person over might not have had that particular unique view. So one of the other things, like Brad said, is sometimes people look at things in a different perspective, and we're chasing different perspectives of what people think is right or what may not be right. And I think that's the biggest problem with this whole process. One of the things that I think about, I say, okay, depicting view sheds. If you gave me a certain thing, you know, a ridgeline's pretty broad, I have to be honest with you. It's a generally large area. If you said, this is a picture in this frame, it would be quantifiable and that would be it. You would be able to say, okay, I'm gonna protect that one little image right there. If it was iconic to the town of Wolfeboro, I could see it. When we start diluting that process a little bit, I don't feel like we could manage that process or even regulate it in a fair fashion. So that's my point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it seems that there's not a lot of enthusiasm for tackling this particular issue at this time. So I'm going to put it in my pile of things that I never throw away in the event that it comes up again.
Must be a pretty big pile there, man.
Do you want me to keep this on the work plan as an item or no?
Well, we're going to come to that.
Okay,
So they're going to have to make that decision.
She has a pile.
Try to save some time, save some time here.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm joking,
All right,
it's
well, we're
fine.
almost there.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay, okay, so the next one is the Lighting Committee membership and mission discussion.
When did we come up with a committee?
Well,
Well, we did. There was a recommendation to form a small committee at the prior meeting.
it was a suggestion.
There was no formal action. There was no formal action, but it was discussed.
Okay,
There were hats thrown into the ring, and that was how we left it that night.
okay.
Yep.
Right.
My hat wasn't in that ring, was it, John?
No, I don't remember your hat.
Okay.
Nope, you were not in there.
Susan?
Yep.
Yeah, I can
John,
see that.
yep. Do you want to do that?
I think it's worth the discussion and trying to, there's always outside stuff that comes into play with other things, and I think it's important.
Okay, important to set up a committee to look at the issue? Okay. I'm not asking you for your hat,
Thank you.
but are
I
are
don't
you
have enough hats
interested in
left, I'm
being on
afraid.
that committee? Okay. Okay. What do you think, Brad? Because this is going to amble its way into your area. Well, it is.
No, I was going to make a recommendation. I think there are a lot of things that the board is going to be working on over the next year. And I think that you're all going to be stretched thin on small committees and things. So I think if 2 members could maybe do this committee, it would be great to sort of share the load amongst the board members. I know it's not my place to recommend that, but I just think there are a lot of things that you're trying to do that are really ambitious to the extent
What are you
that...
suggesting, keep the committee small?
I'm suggesting just 2 of you perhaps, so that others can serve in different capacities.
Doing what, Ned? I'm sorry.
Just having 2 planning board members
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
And yes, keeping the committee small so that the recommendations can be
Right.
quickly arrived at.
Yes, I'm all for that.
Yeah, that was my
So
thought.
what's our public input? We had Patty Cook and who else?
What, yeah, I'm not sure if Patty Cook is really interested in being on the committee.
Perhaps you could just set a number of public members and we could talk about who to recruit.
Right.
Would that be okay?
Oh, okay, but I think that is a good suggestion for a couple people to
Yeah.
sit down and come up with some direction, basically.
Well, our direction should be coming from the planning board.
Why don't we?
Yes,
Yep.
How about if we asked the 2 sitting members of the lighting committee to propose a couple of members from the public at our next meeting?
okay,
We could all discuss and let them choose who they would want to work with on the subcommittee.
right.
So we're gonna craft a purpose?
Well, no, actually, I mean, I thought when we talked about this the last time, that
Should
that
we,
the Patty Cook email was sort of the direction.
okay, so we're talking town-wide see what I'm saying?
Yes, I
Are we
do.
talking the downtown area first, and then we're gonna expand a little bit, we're trying to get some continuity for the town going a little bit?
I think there are 3 distinct issues. I think there are, and I think that some of them might not be the purview of the planning board, so I think we
Well,
should be, no, I know, I just think we should, to that question, I think you should be careful about the mission statement for the group. I think you can still advise the Board of Selectmen on exactly what John's talking about, the continuity, but the first issue is the lighting ordinance and how it deals with private property lighting, particularly residential, honestly. That's where a lot of this issue has come up. Second is commercial lighting in the downtown core area and in other peripheral areas in the community. And the third issue, I think, is continuity of the town's lighting profile, if you will, whether it be lights at Foss Field and Dockside, or it be the municipal electric streetlights that are around town. I think that piece is definitely the Board of Selectmen's authority. And I hate to put Brad on the spot, but I don't know if there'd be an issue with at least discussing that, recognizing that you can't do more than, bring the issue to the Board of Selectmen. But I think having a dialogue about it would be productive unless the board really wants to.
No, I think they should have a dialogue about it and stuff. And at that point, maybe even include, Barry into it and stuff. Being the election, running the MED there, so. I don't think we need to get him involved in all the other parts of it with the houses and the downtown stuff that we're talking about here with this email, but.
And I think it's above board because I think what you would say to Barry is, look, we're trying to have a uniform lighting look and feel in the community, and you could talk to him about what he is doing to do that or not doing to do that. I think it's totally okay to talk to him. You just don't have jurisdiction to make changes, obviously, but you certainly could write a letter to the Board of Selectmen. I think that'd be useful.
Well, the email that you put in our packets Vaughn's email to Dave Bowers. So, I mean, it was in my packet, I assume.
Yes.
Everyone got
Yep.
this?
Yeah, so they're aware of it.
Yeah, right.
And it doesn't make any sense for the lighting subcommittee of the planning board not to consider municipal lighting.
Yes.
I agree.
Because it's
I
one of
agree.
the biggest
Yeah.
lighting features that we have in
agree.
town.
Exactly, right.
You know, I feel some of this is that technology has been skipping ahead quickly these past few years.
Yeah.
And I think that even if everybody just talks about the different kinds and what they look like and what the things are, and these light bulbs look like this, we all need to get re-educated on what's available, because it really is skipping way ahead in those LED lights. Just amazingly, you know, we think, oh, a street light looks like this, but geez, Barry just put up some new ones down my street and they look totally different. And the light coming off them is absolutely different.
Yep.
So if nothing else, it would be educational for everybody involved.
They're not, the new lights that Barry's putting out, at least the ones around my house, no more insects at nighttime.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Why?
because they don't like the light. The light is making them feel uncomfortable, and it's going away. There's no moths. There's very few cicadas.
So is that a good thing?
I have
or a
virtually
bad
no
thing?
owls.
What about mosquitoes?
It's ever since the light came in. I now have a swash of almost daylight going clear across my garden.
Yeah.
And the little critters aren't quite sure what time of the day it is. So the ones who are busy at nighttime aren't coming out because it's daytime to them.
Okay, well, how do you want to proceed? Matt, you're suggesting a couple members. Susan and John have indicated an interest. And we've defined 3 issues: private property, commercial lighting, and public. And
They're gonna suggest names to the board that they
okay,
would like to be sitting with.
okay.
Could I maybe send you a draft mission statement for your
Yeah.
consideration at the next
Yeah.
meeting? Would
Yeah.
that work?
We gotta have some information before we can craft some sort of a process so we can think about what we're gonna be doing.
Okay,
I can send you a draft mission statement, and then I'll just maybe recommend a motion on committee members. Is that fine? Because my intent tonight was just, I wasn't sure if you definitely wanted to do this. That was my ask tonight. So you do, that's good. I'll get you a draft membership set, and then not people, but kind of how many public members, that kind of thing.
It almost comes right back to the basics, because if we don't review what we have already, we won't know what we have going forward. So it's almost
Right.
like an overview first, and then a thought process of what everybody's using, basically,
Yeah.
and then
Like a
where are
survey.
we going?
Yeah.
Again, we did that one night, we got the LED lights, and we passed the thing,
Yep.
and that was it.
okay, and you'll be happy to know that our new master plan suggests that we look at this.
I am
So-
very happy to know that.
Yes, right.
But
And
can I
what
just
committee was
ask,
that?
is it
I
possible to
think it was
just have
probably future land use.
a
Gonna have to check.
simple letter in the paper, as Julie
Sure.
stated,
Yeah,
stating all of the new
Okay.
friendlier lighting technology that is now available, and asking people to consider using that instead, and see what happens. That may fix the problem right there.
So just sort of a educational letter to go into the paper?
It may fix the problem.
Okay.
Instead of forming a committee and having to pull all these people in and do an analysis, why don't we just do a little educational article and hope that people read it and say, oh, you know, that's a good point. Why don't I use this kind of LED light instead of that old LED technology? It looks a lot better. That
But
could fix the
the way
problem
that,
right there.
the way that the turnover is now, it could be 5 years before they have to change that bulb.
Say it again?
It may take up to 5 years for the people to say that they have to change the bulb that's the awful one into the new one that they've decided is better.
Why?
What's the incentive to
Because they're waiting for the old one
change?
to burn out?
They burn out really slowly. That's one of the
Well, ask them
good
to
things.
replace it, even though it hasn't been burned out. You never know, they might.
I would go for 2 meetings. I would do the 2 meetings. I would hold 2 meetings on this with the subcommittee, no more than that, 2 meetings.
Okay, all right.
I think it's a good goal to set. I think that there is a piece that Susan's talking about that I agree with, that I think that one of the recommendations from the committee may be kind of a lighting 101 that we get out there somehow so that people do understand and that people realize that it has an impact on their abutters. But yeah, I mean, John, I agree. Maybe not 2, but very, very few, and get sort of like a task force and get it done. But I do think there may be some amendments needed to the ordinance. So that may be the thing that takes you a little bit of time. And I don't know what exactly those need to be, but we may need to play with some of the light temperature things that are in the ordinance. We may want to add some prohibited types of lights in the ordinance. I don't know just yet, but it shouldn't take too much time, even with that in mind at all, I don't think. Pretty clear idea of what we don't want, I think. That's a good thing.
Okay, so you're going to do the mission statement,
Yep.
and Susan and John will come up with a couple members. Okay, all right.
Again,
Thank you.
one thing that I would suggest is that I am a little worried about the planning board members choosing the people on the committee, and should this be something which is put out into the population, the town, as to people who might want to be on that committee. And I don't know whether that's the right thing, but I think that having the total community involved may be better, and ultimately we may then choose who we want on that committee, but it might be nice to allow the town to have input.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Okay, oh dear, I lost my, okay. All right, the next one, the Charrette update, the ongoing saga.
Oh, goodness. So the charrette had been postponed. I did update you on that a few months ago. We had been planning for a hybrid charrette option in October, I think 2nd and 3rd of this year. As we got closer and closer, the issue actually was different than I had anticipated, and it was that the Plan New Hampshire folks were actually very concerned about their ability to get their team together to come to the community based on concerns about COVID. I probably should have anticipated that, but I did not. So in the end, we decided that we would write essentially a commitment letter to each other, allowing us to encumber the monies that were budgeted last year, but to look forward to spring of 2021 to hold the charrette. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Although we tried to fight it and move forward, I think it's okay to wait. And ultimately, if we had had a really heavily weighed virtual option, I don't think we would have gotten the charrette results that we would have hoped for, or gotten the recommendations about the facilities in that area. So I would also just note that there is progress being made. Obviously, the Lakes Region Model Railroad Museum is moving ahead. We do still have the feasibility money for the municipal electric generation building. There are projects that are going to happen in that area over the next year until the charrette happens that I think will provide us with more of a sense of what that, what the character of that area is moving, what the direction is that character is moving in. So I think the appetite for the charrette will be the same in spring of 2021, and I think it'll hopefully be a safer environment to do it in. So I think it's a smart decision to make. So it'll be moved until 2021.
Okay, so this will be on the new persons.
Yes.
Wait, yep, okay, all right. Okay, now we got to the work plan. Okay, all right, Matt has done a revised work plan. So why don't we just, do you want to quickly go through this so that we can make sure that we're all on the same page?
You want me to lead that, Kathy? I'm happy to.
Yes, why don't you?
So looking forward, we have several tasks in the work plan. I've tried to identify the higher priority tasks with this bold font, obviously, towards the top half of the table. The first item, application review, is just the ongoing processing of applications, planning board, subdivisions, site plans, special use permits, those sorts of things that have to continue. That is obviously not an optional item in any way. The Plan New Hampshire charrette, that is obviously delayed until spring of 2021. Many of the pieces are in place to actually do that, so the lift will not be too heavy, but we do have a small steering committee that's sort of set up to assist there, and hopefully the new person will come on board to assist with that effort. Review of the impact fee basis and removal of the impact fee. I did at a prior meeting strongly recommend that the planning board this year undertake a fee basis study to determine whether the impact fee amount should be reduced. And please remember, and if you need the backup materials for this, I'm happy to provide them, but we had discussed initially removing impact fees from our zoning ordinance. And the advice of council was that we shouldn't actually remove the ordinance, but simply put the fee to zero. And the reason for that is that in the future, there may be a need to have an impact fee again based on changing growth conditions or some change in the community where we actually do need to look at collecting that. So the advice was to actually, and this is something the planning board can do at a public hearing, it doesn't have to go to the voters to do it. The advice was that we review the impact fee basis, ensure that there truly is not a need for the impact fee any longer, and then take an action, you all would take an action as a board to reduce it to zero if you think that's the appropriate action. I know John has a question, but one just last thing, and that is that I did engage the person who did the impact fee studies back in 2009, 2010, Bruce Mayberry. I've had some conversations with him over the past few days, although he's semi-retired. He's willing to help us with this, and he is available, so I'm hoping to engage him immediately to perform that fee basis study so that you have this going forward into the zoning season if questions arise about why the board is not taking a zoning action.
Okay, so the study will be ongoing, I mean, for the next probably couple months, 2 or 3.
Couple months.
And then he'll come to us with some changes that we can just do administratively with a public hearing?
That's correct. That's correct.
With a public hearing?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So the thought that the impact fee would be lowered to a zero may be beneficial because isn't there a recipient of the impact fee?
The impact fee recipient is the school district.
That's correct. So if we lowered the impact fee to zero, we weren't eliminating the impact fee, but we weren't contributing a impact fee.
Right, if you eliminate, and this will be the hot argument, I think, and that is that if you remove the impact fee, all that you are doing is effectively shifting that burden onto the normal taxpayers. Mm-hmm. It's not a substantial impact fee payment. I've provided those data to you in the past, but you should have them again. But that is an issue that I expect will come up, that yes, it does create issues when you're building a new house, and that's a problem, but is it the right thing to do to push it onto the existing residents? That's the big political question, I think.
But that fee, like all the other impacts for all the warrant articles, can be reduced down to cents, 0.0 cents, and 0.128 cents.
Absolutely. I mean, the monies that we've collected for impact fees range between, I think, $30,000 and $90,000 over the past 10 years. And on the 1,000, it's not a substantial impact, but it is an impact. But your point's valid, John. Okay.
Okay, the water quality chapter, since the Wolfeboro Waters Committee has been formed, and then the subcommittee that we talked about earlier, I mean, they're actually going to be doing some background work and things that could ultimately go into the water quality chapter. So that's why we're thinking of putting that off, but it's a high priority because the committees are working.
Yes, and a lot of the shorefront, both the shorefront residential district changes that you saw tonight and the stormwater management regs are a direct sort of jump towards some of the implementation that I think would have come out of that water quality chapter. So you're a bit ahead of the game, so I think you can wait a little bit on that chapter till a later time.
Right.
The next few items, the parking, voluntary design review, affordable housing overlay, mean natural grade, shorefront residential, and habitable space. You have all seen those. They will come back to you, obviously, over the coming months as zoning amendments with some minor changes based on your comments. One point, I'll jump a little bit ahead, and that is that in talking to Kathy, based on the transition, I'm not sure that a detailed review or a comprehensive review of the inclusionary zoning and the affordable housing overlay can be done this year. This is the first one where I've got to defer to the board. If you want to push to get this done, it's up to you, but I am concerned that without, council weighing in, staff being here, that may not be achievable. That's certainly no comment to the board's ability, but I just am concerned about that and whether it's actually a priority. So I've recommended that the basic affordable housing overlay changes be made, but that the more comprehensive review be done out in 2021. An administrative item here. The 2020 zoning changes that were approved have not been posted to general code, so I just need to check in with them and see where that's at. So some of the changes that were approved by the voters aren't on the online system just yet. Drive-through ordinance review. Obviously, I need to Kathy's going to write a letter to Paul Zimmerman, but there is an interest in a public session to discuss that in October or November of this year, which I'll take a note of. There's just a small administrative issue with the conditional use permit criteria for accessory dwelling units that we realized over the past couple weeks here. It's something that needs to be adjusted within the general code system. It didn't impact your decision in any way. There was just an error made when general code was making the update online that I need to address. Master plan implementation. The master plan is currently being printed, thanks to Julie.
Bound.
What's that?
Bound.
Yes, being bound right now.
Bound.
So you'll have them for your next meeting, I hope, in 2 weeks.
Yes.
And
the binding arrived yesterday.
I'm wondering if we could, we have one public hearing, could we then have a discussion on the master plan implementation?
Sure, at the September meeting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Absolutely. Okay. Another administrative item, you may not remember this, we have sort of a new site plan review checklist that we're using for site plan review applications. We've had our first application that we've applied that to, but we do need to make some amendments to our subdivision checklist as well, and hopefully that will be done. If not by me, but by somebody later in the year. It's pretty easy to do, so it should be simply done. Again, affordable housing inclusionary zoning will be done in 2021. The short-term rental committee work, in my opinion, quite frankly, is on hold. I don't think this has been a substantial issue. I have not heard feedback really this year. Obviously, we're in a very different condition than we were in prior years when it comes to room meals tax and people coming into the community, but quite frankly, I think other issues have risen to the top of the priority list, including water quality. So in talking to Kathy, and hopefully you all are in agreement, this can wait a bit more time, though I do think it should be on the work plan because I expect it may arise as an issue in the future.
Is that okay with folks?
Okay. Adoption of revised road standards. I need to just push a little bit more with the Public Works Department. We do have a draft again. Honestly, we've had this draft for quite a while, so I apologize in the delay for that. That said, we aren't expecting any major subdivisions that would be impacted by this, so it's not a critically important item, but it is something that should be done. We are having a problem with our GIS consultant updating the zoning map layers online. This is, again, an administrative thing that I need to deal with, not for you to be concerned with, but I just wanted to make you aware of it.
Yeah, Matt, on the road standards,
Yes.
will Dave Ford be bringing those to us?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right, thanks, all right.
There is an administrative correction needed based on a vote that took place in 2013 as far as conversion of one permitted use to another permitted use. You wouldn't really know this unless you were looking for it, and I didn't know it, and Kathy happened to see it when we were having an issue with an application. Just a minor administrative error that needs to be corrected. One of the other things that I hate to push out, but this special use permit requirement for foundation perimeter drains, I know, John, that was something that we were going to talk about. I've suggested that this can wait a small amount of time, so I have put it out in 2021.
That wouldn't come in with the stormwater?
I think to some extent it does, but at the same time, special use isn't necessarily subject to, not all special use permits are subject to the stormwater management regulations, so.
No, but that would be infliction on the neighbor or on the lake.
There's definitely a piece. Oh, yeah, no question about it. But if somebody comes in for a very minor wetlands buffer impact and they're doing an infiltration trench, the stormwater management regs don't get pulled in. So there's still a need to look at what the requirements are for BMPs as part of that process, because I know that was an issue that was identified. Foundation certification policy, this is actually one that I actually think is a very high priority, but it's one that I need to communicate to staff because I think it's a policy that needs to be adopted by the department. We did have some discussions about that, and I actually have a draft. Municipal technical assistance grant application for conservation subdivision ordinance. This is not a high priority. It's not a pressing issue. Our conservation subdivision ordinance, although it does have issues, was used effectively this year as part of the name is escaping me, but the Southern Spectrum parcel out on Springfield Point Road. So the current ordinance does work. It just has issues, but it should be reviewed moving forward. Stormwater management regulations are being...
Hang on, we wanted to get a consultant to do that?
That was my thought.
Yeah, okay.
But I know there were other thoughts that we didn't need a consultant. That's ultimately up to the board, but...
Okay, well, but the money would need to be in the budget for 20...
Yes, so getting to the next discussion, I think that should be in your budget for next year.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
All right.
I do. Stormwater management regulations review. This has obviously been accelerated a little bit based on the meeting today, so we are looking at some amendments to that, but ultimately I think we just want a very basic review from an engineer and an environmental consultant. And then the remaining of these items, I'm not going to go through a one-on-one. They're very administrative in a lot of cases. The lighting regulation one, which is about 4 up from the bottom, that is one that I think may come out as part of this lighting committee's work, that potentially some of the lighting standards need to be moved from one place to another, site plan, zoning. I think there really does need to be a review of that. So I think that this committee is a good idea. Excuse me, provided that it can do this pretty effectively, and I think that it can. Other than that, that appears to be your 2020 work plan, and certainly going to 2021 as well. There are quite a few tasks on there.
You can probably take the conservation subdivision ordinance review off, can't you? I mean,
Here we go, done.
Doesn't that go up with the...
Yes, it does.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll take the waiver provision out too. That is also done. Is there anything missing?
Anything missing, folks, that you're dying to delve into?
I think this is everything.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as long as we can start talking about the master plan implementation.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
I'm not trying to put it on your plate, Matt.
No, that's fine.
But I just think that the planning board needs to talk about it. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, okay, that's the budget, 2021 budget.
Could I make a recommendation on this? Could we bring this back for that first September meeting? The budgets are technically due, but I would like to put a placeholder in here and come back to talk to you a little more detail. I don't want to talk about this tonight because we're all getting tired, I'm sure.
Yep, that's fine.
And I'd like to give you some more detail.
Okay. All right. Anything else, folks? Okay.
Just one, if I could.
Yeah?
I only want to have to do this once, so tonight's the night. I just want to thank all of you so much for the last couple of years working with you. It has been a real pleasure, and honestly, without the support, encouragement, and the confidence that you've instilled with me being here, I wouldn't be moving on to this new opportunity. So it was a really hard decision. I know that everybody says that when they take on a new job, but this was really a tough one. But I wouldn't have the confidence to give it a shot if it weren't for working with all of you. So I just want to thank each of you. I know that I'll be here for 2 months, but we all know that time is going to move very, very quickly. So if we have a chance to get together, whether it's for a beer or a coffee or something else at some point in the future, I'd really enjoy that. I think you all have my cell phone number. Please call me. It's not going to change as I move on. So I just want to thank each and every one of you again. It's been a really wonderful experience to work with you, particularly on the master plan effort. That was really something that I'm proud of moving on, and hopefully you are too. And I'm sure I'll be back and I'll be around. My family's in town now, so hopefully I'll see you soon.
Okay, well,
thank you.
Matt, as I said to Jim, you have given 100% to the town, and I think we've been fortunate to have you for almost 4 years.
Extremely fortunate.
Good luck
Thank you,
to
Kathy. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so motion to adjourn. Motion and second. Somebody want to make it, John, second the motion?
Seconded.
Somebody seconded, okay, thanks, Susan. Okay, I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Peter? We're adjourned.
Yes.
Okay, John Thurston?
Yes.
Mike Hodder?
Yes.
Brad Harriman?
Yes.
Susan Replier?
Yes.
Julie Jacobs?
Yes?
Okay, and thanks for sitting in, Julie. And Kathy Barnard, I'm in favor of adjourning.
Right on time.
Okay, see you in September, if not before.
See you in September. That's a good song.
I think something like